Shalom, everyone. I'm Josiah Geoffrey.
I'm Hosea Geoffrey.
And we're back discussing the Torah portions. This week we're looking at the portion of Kiy-Tavo, which goes from Deuteronomy 26:1 through 29:8. Or if you're reading a Christian translation, it'll be through 29:9. We've already read the portion ahead of time, but if you'd like to read it as well, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and do that, and then we'll go ahead and get into discussing.
In Kiy-Tavo, Moses once again instructs the people of Israel about their essential need to obey the commands of Adonai their God, informing them in detail, on the one hand, about the blessings for obeying God's voice, and on the other hand, the terrible curses for disobeying his word.
So this portion begins with Moses commanding the people of Israel, after they enter the land of Canaan, that they need to come and bring offerings to God from the produce of the land. First, Moses talks about basically giving the first fruit of anything that the people of Israel get. When they bring in their first harvests ever that they plant in the land of Canaan, the first thing that they need to do is take some of it in a basket and bring it to the priest, bring that as an offering to God. And then Moses also talks about how every third year the people of Israel need to give their tithes or their tenths to the Levites and the sojourners and the widows and the orphans. The third year is designated as the year of tithing, it says. And so every third year they're supposed to give that tenth in obedience to God. What's interesting about this passage is that Moses adds to talk about what the people of Israel should say to God as they're giving these offerings. Basically, the people of Israel are supposed to acknowledge that this is the land that God gave them, and then they're supposed to remember their entire history, going all the way back to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then going forward through their suffering in Egypt, and then how God heard their cries and remembered them, and then brought them into this land. And then they're also supposed to say, specifically when they give their tenths to the Levite and sojourner and such, they're supposed to say, look, God, I gave it just like you commanded me to. I'm following your commands. I'm remembering your commands. Now please look down from heaven on your people Israel and bless us because we're following after your ways.
It's very interesting that when the people of Israel bring these offerings to God, they're supposed to recount and remember their history. This is something we've mentioned time and time again, that it all comes back around to what God did for the people of Israel in bringing them out of Egypt. That is the basis of the entire Torah, that God redeemed them from Egypt, took them for himself, and gave them these rules so that they would be his people. And so without Egypt, without the suffering that our people went through, the entire Torah and the basis of God's authority loses a lot of its foundation. And so when the people of Israel are in the land receiving those blessings from God, they need to remember what happened in Egypt, remember the suffering they endured, and then contrast that with the blessing that they now have. And say, God, you heard our cries, you brought us out of the land of suffering, and you brought us into this land of plenty, and so now I'm giving back to you. I am obeying you, I'm listening to you, I am serving you, because you are the God who saved our people.
And going back even before their suffering in Egypt, they remember their forefathers in the patriarchs. They remember how Jacob was a wanderer who lived in Aramea, and he ended up becoming a great nation in Egypt. And they also remember how God swore this land flowing with milk and honey to their forefathers. And when they were in Egypt, they cried out to the God of their fathers. So everything not only goes back to their suffering in Egypt, but also to the promises made to the patriarchs. That is the even greater foundation than just them being brought out of Egypt.
One other thing that I find noteworthy here is when Moses is outlining the prayer that the people of Israel are supposed to make after they've given their tithe, when they go up to the place that God chooses to give that tenth, he says that they're supposed to pray to God, look down from your holy habitation from heaven and bless your people Israel. So I found this really interesting because we've already talked a lot about the Mishkan and how God commanded Moses with the plans to set up this tabernacle so that he could come and dwell with the people of Israel. He would have his own tent in the middle of the camp of Israel, and that's where he would live. And since what Moses describes here is the people of Israel coming up to the place where God puts his name, that is God's house. They're going up to the priest who is at God's tent and giving that offering there. But what Moses is saying is that when they go to God's dwelling place, they're supposed to ask God to look down on them from his dwelling place in heaven. And this reminded me of something that Solomon said when he had finished building the temple, which was a permanent house to replace the Mishkan, which was a tent. So Solomon replaced that tent with an ornate house that was supposed to be much more glorious and much more deserving of God's reputation and glory. But when Solomon dedicates the house, he says, "But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? Yet have regard to the prayer of your servant and to his plea, O Adonai my God, that your eyes may be open night and day toward this house, the place of which you have said, my name shall be there, that you may listen to the prayer that your servant offers toward this place. And listen to the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place, and listen in heaven, your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive." So Solomon is recognizing that the house that he built isn't really where God lives. God is in heaven. Heaven cannot contain him. How much less a house made with hands? And yet, God chose to attach his name to that place, to Jerusalem, and to the house that was built there, for the purpose being that when the people of Israel call on his name, when they come to that place seeking his face and his voice and his presence, like Moses is instructing the people of Israel to do here, where they go to the place to give their offerings to God and to give their prayers to God. When they do that, God will hear. God will treat it like they're coming into his own dwelling place, even though he is in the heaven, far higher than any of us and anywhere we can go. And so this dwelling place serves as a picture of the heavenly holy place where God dwells. It is there to be an image and a pattern and a rallying point for the people of Israel to come into God's presence. And yet, God's presence can't be contained in that house. The only way to come into God's presence fully is to enter into the heaven, which is what Yeshua did for all of us as the better high priest going into the real holy place, not just a pattern of it, not just a picture of it, but the real deal. And he went up there to make the way for us so that through him, we can go there too. So we can be in his presence more fully, more than just entering into this pattern of the holy place, into God's house where he chose to put his name and the picture of his glory, but actually to enter into the very heaven, into his glorious presence.
So now, with Moses having finished giving these commands about bringing offerings to God, this basically wraps up the entire command-giving section of the Torah, period. Moses begins the conclusion of the Torah, starting here with reiterating how the people of Israel have committed that Adonai is going to be their God, and God has said that the people of Israel are going to be his people. So Moses says that because God is the people of Israel's God, then they need to keep his commands with all their heart and all their soul, hearkening all the way back to the Ve'ahavta, which says to love Adonai your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength. And so they need to keep his commands and they need to listen to his voice. What God says, the people of Israel need to listen to. They need to show him that respect and they need to obey him. And likewise, since Adonai has said that the people of Israel are going to be his people, Adonai is going to take the people of Israel to be his own treasured possession and holy people. So hearkening back to what we read in Exodus when God promised that Israel would be his holy nation and kingdom of priests. And it says that he will set you high above all the nations which he has made for praise, fame, and honor, and that you shall be a consecrated people or a holy people to Adonai your God as he has spoken. So this is basically concisely repeating stuff that we've already read throughout the Torah and indicating that the Torah is for the purpose of Israel being God's people and God being Israel's God. And God specifically promises that he'll elevate the people of Israel above other nations for the purpose of praise and glory and honor. This reminds me of something that Paul says in the book of Romans, when he says that there will be glory and honor and peace to everyone who is working the good, both to Yehudi first, to the Jew first, and to Greek. But then he also says there will be oppression and distress upon every soul of man that is working the evil, both of Yehudi first and of Greek. So Paul is saying that Jews are first in the order of things. That goes for both blessing and honor and also for destruction and oppression. God is lifting the people of Israel up above the other peoples, but that's not for the purpose of showing favoritism. In fact, as Paul goes on to say here in Romans, indeed, there is no acceptance of faces or favoritism with God. God is putting the people of Israel first, but that goes for both the good and the bad, and that doesn't mean that the other nations won't get that good and bad just as much. As we're going to see here in depth in this portion, being God's people and being close to him and being elevated above the nations comes with blessings and curses. There's a danger to it if we go astray, but there's blessing for it if we stay close to God. And so right here, as Moses is finishing discussing all the different commands that the people of Israel have been given, he's saying, you are God's holy people. You are special. You are unique. And so that puts you in a very singular position where you are close to God, and you'll have to choose how that's going to play out.
I also want to point out that in Moses' statements here, where he's telling the people of Israel that they need to keep God's commands, he's basing it this time on the mutual obligation that Israel and God have to each other. And I thought this was really interesting because a lot of the time we've been talking about just how God chose Israel. God brought them out of Egypt. God gave them the Torah, this and that God did for Israel. And a lot of that is unconditional. But in this case, Moses is setting it up as something mutual, where it's the people declared that Adonai is their God and that they need to keep his commands, and that God chose Israel and told them they need to keep his commands. So on both ends, there's this promise of, I will be your people, you will be my God, and I will keep your commands. And this reminded me, once again, of going all the way back to the foundation of the Torah, the patriarchs, specifically the wandering Aramean Jacob. Jacob had a dream in which Adonai promised to him, I am Adonai, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. In you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So here is God giving this promise to Jacob that his offspring is going to be a great nation which inherits the land of Canaan and is a blessing to all the earth and is as numerous as the stars of the heaven. This is confirming the blessing to Abraham and Isaac. But then Jacob replied, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, then Adonai shall be my God. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So we see here that God made unconditional promises to Israel about the land and about how their offspring would be numerous and how they would bless all the earth. And yet Jacob made that mutual. Jacob turned that declaration of God saying, I'm going to make your offspring be my people, and he turned that into, God is going to be my God, and I'm going to give back a tenth to him. And then we have right here that Moses is telling the people of Israel, you are part of that mutual arrangement. God chose you unconditionally to be his people. In fact, what Moses says here when he's establishing this mutual agreement is that God is declaring today to do what he had promised to make Israel his people. So even this mutual arrangement is still rooted in God's unconditional, unilateral declaration. And yet we see that, like Jacob before them, the people of Israel, when they enter into this, they're entering into this with their own obligations that they are agreeing to. So it goes two ways. God is unconditionally choosing Israel, and yet Israel needs to choose God. God has chosen that Israel is to be his people, but Israel has to decide every day, every generation, whether they are going to be his people and make him their God by following him and listening to his voice and obeying all that he commands.
And then after Moses talks about how the people of Israel are bound to their obligation to keep God's commands, he then says that when the people of Israel go over into the land of Canaan, they're supposed to set up a monument on which is written all the commands of Adonai. Basically, they're supposed to set up some large stones, and they're going to be coated in lime. And then they're going to write down the entire Torah in nice legible letters and make a big monument for the people of Israel to see and to be able to read. They're supposed to set up this monument on a place called Mount Ebal. And there they're also supposed to build an altar of uncut stones and make sacrifices to God and rejoice there before him. So very shortly after the people of Israel enter the land of Canaan, and Joshua actually followed these commands, by the way, they go in there and then they're setting up the Torah for all the people of Israel to see. So going forward, the people of Israel, they'll have these commands there. They can go and look at them anytime they want. It's not just that you have to have your own personal Torah scroll or something like that. This is available for all the people of Israel to see. And there's no excuse for the people of Israel to not know God's commands. They're right there. They're in the presence of all the people.
Moses also says that when the people of Israel cross over the Jordan and they do all this, where they set up the monument and the altar, they also need to have a sort of ceremony where they set out the blessings and the curses for the people of Israel. Basically, half the tribes of Israel are supposed to stand on Mount Ebal, and the other half are supposed to stand on Mount Gerizim, which is another mountain right next to Ebal. So these are going to be two opposing mountains, and the people of Israel are standing there opposing each other. And one half is supposed to declare the blessings of God, and the other half is supposed to declare the curses. The blessings if they obey God's commands, and the curses if they disobey God's commands. And then Moses specifically says that the Levites are supposed to declare to the people of Israel these curses upon everyone who does a number of violations against the Torah. And so the Levites are supposed to read out these curses in the hearing of all Israel, and all Israel is supposed to affirm them by saying Amen. And so these curses are denouncing pretty evil stuff that we've already talked about before in the Torah, just giving a quick rundown of them again, starting with idolatry. He says, "Cursed be the man who makes a carved or cast metal image." And then moving on, "Cursed be anyone who dishonors his father or his mother." So these are obviously big deal things from the Ten Commandments. But then there's also some less obvious ones, like "Cursed be anyone who misleads a blind man on the road." "Cursed be anyone who perverts the justice due to the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow." So all of these are really denouncing evil, abominations, uncleanness, and injustice, and just saying everyone needs to be righteous or else. And then this is embodied in the last of these, which says, "Cursed be anyone who does not confirm the words of this Torah by doing them." And all the people shall say, Amen. So this statement here is very general and blanket. The people of Israel need to do the Torah. All of it, the whole thing, no exceptions. They have to do the whole thing or they come under a curse. And so these curses here provide no margin for error for the people of Israel. If they stumble, if they sin, if they violate the Torah, they are putting themselves under a curse. Moses is about to describe here in lots of brutal detail about all the curses that the people of Israel will receive if they don't follow the Torah, as well as the blessings they will receive if they do follow the Torah. But what Moses is saying here is that if they don't keep the whole Torah, then all the curses will come upon them and it won't be good. And so this creates a major problem for the people of Israel because we all make many stumbles. And we've seen throughout the Torah, it's been the repeating theme that the people of Israel keep messing up. From the time that they came out of Egypt, they have been grumbling against God, refusing to follow his instructions, making idols, cursing his leaders, refusing his instructions, and in all sorts of ways just rebelling against God's authority. And the result has been death, lots and lots of death. And so Moses is just establishing that as long as the people of Israel are still that way, that problem is going to continue because it's just in their nature. Moses said they are a stubborn people. And so this curse is going to keep being an accusation against them, a witness against them, and sending terrible judgment upon them.
We just read how the people of Israel were supposed to set up a monument that had the whole Torah written on it, and they set that up on Mount Ebal. But then here Moses is saying that the people of Israel need to place a blessing and a curse. The blessing goes on Mount Gerizim and the curse goes on Mount Ebal. So the same mountain that has the Torah there is the mountain that has the curse there. So basically, whenever the people of Israel try to come to the Torah, they're faced with having to deal with this huge curse that's in the Torah, that's interwoven with the Torah. And so the people of Israel, they're under that danger so long as they're under the Torah, and the Torah stands as a judge against them, bringing curses and judgment on the people.
Yaakov says that whoever breaks even one command of the Torah is guilty of breaking the whole Torah. So just like you're saying, when the people of Israel approach the Torah, if any part of the Torah, any part of that huge monument, any letter in it condemns them, then the whole mountain is declaring that curse upon them. That is how critical it is to obey the whole thing, and how impossible it is to obey the whole thing, and how impossible it is to avoid this curse. And yet, Paul teaches on this passage and says, "For as many as are of actions of Torah are under a curse. For it has been written, cursed is everyone who is not continuing all things that have been written in the book of the Torah to do them. And it is evident that by Torah no one is declared righteous before God, because the righteous will live by faith." So the Torah that is based on actions is not of faith. Rather, the one who did them will live in them. But Messiah redeemed us from the curse declared in the Torah, having become a curse for us. For it has been written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree, so that we may receive the promise of the Ruach through faith. We actually already read one of these verses that Paul quotes here in the last portion, when it said, cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree. And so Paul is pointing out here that when Yeshua was crucified, he was hung on a tree. And so he got that curse from the Torah. But he never broke any of the Torah. He did indeed confirm everything that was written in the Torah by doing it. And so, unlike all of the rest of us, he was not under that curse. And yet, he put himself under a curse by being crucified, by giving up his life, by subjecting himself to shame, even though he had done nothing worthy of shame. So for all of the rest of us, if we try to come to God through the Torah, through the actions of the Torah, we end up being condemned by this curse on Mount Ebal, because we did not do all the things written in the Torah. We did not confirm it. We broke the rules, and so the whole Torah holds us under this curse. But Yeshua took that curse upon himself. The curse of Mount Ebal is removed if we come to Yeshua in faith, because he redeemed us from that by taking the curse. Paul says that he became a curse for us. So everything that was put on Mount Ebal, all those curses which condemn anyone who breaks a single rule of the Torah, he took that all on himself. He said, no, that's my problem now. I'm under the curse. That's my curse. You don't need to worry about that anymore. And so he took that with him. He died. He was taken down and buried. And then he rose up again in new life. And so that curse is gone. That is in the ground. If we follow Yeshua in faith, as the prophets say, the righteous will live by faith. So if we have the faith to follow Yeshua by carrying our own execution stakes, being buried with him, then we will be raised to new life with him. And so that curse is left in the ground for him and for us and for everyone who follows him in faith. We are free from this declaration, and the Jewish people can then come to the Torah without that curse, if they are coming through that faith instead of just trying to come in through their actions.
We've already talked about how God chose the people of Israel and put them in a unique, special, holy place. And that means that he expects a lot of the people of Israel. And so if the people of Israel tried to meet these huge expectations on their own strength, then that won't accomplish anything. The Torah will condemn them. We've already seen multiple times throughout the Torah how when the people of Israel try to do things themselves apart from God, then they will fail. But by coming to God through faith, not through their own good actions, but through faith in the Messiah Yeshua who took this curse upon himself, then the Torah won't condemn the people of Israel anymore. The Torah will be there and give the blessings to the people of Israel. That's what will be left for the people of Israel when they come to God in faith through the Messiah Yeshua. So next in Deuteronomy 28, Moses begins to actually discuss what the actual blessings and curses are for the people of Israel if they obey or disobey. He starts out by giving the blessings. He says, "It shall be, if you diligently obey Adonai your God, being careful to do all his commands which I command you today, Adonai your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth." So paralleling what we read before. "All these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you obey Adonai your God." And then the blessings that Moses says the people of Israel will get is that they'll get tons and tons of provision and sustenance. They'll be healthy. They'll have victory over their enemies, and they'll live in peace. They'll be fruitful and fertile. And Adonai will establish you as a holy people to himself, as he swore to you, if you keep the commandments of Adonai your God and walk in his ways. So all the peoples of the earth will see that you are called by the name of Adonai, and they will be afraid of you. Adonai will make you the head and not the tail, and you only will be above, and you will not be underneath, if you listen to the commandments of Adonai your God, which I charge you today, to observe them carefully.
I find it really interesting that Moses sets this up here as Adonai will establish you as a people holy to himself, as he has sworn to you, if you keep the commandments of Adonai your God. This is really interesting because on the one hand, he's saying he'll do what he's already sworn he'll do, but he'll also do it conditionally. So this is an unconditional promise that Moses is still making conditional. God is going to make Israel a people holy for himself, to be a blessing to all the families of the earth, but he'll only do it if the people of Israel keep his commands. So the fact that he is going to do it, and he'll only do it if they keep his commands, points to the fact that one day they will keep his commands. The only way that God's promises can be fulfilled and yet also be in line with these conditional contingencies here is that the people of Israel will all one day obey God, listen to his voice, and be that holy people that God has promised that they will be. And of course, that can only happen when the people of Israel accept the new covenant with the Master Yeshua writing the Torah on their hearts.
And it's also worth noting that God is saying that when these blessings pursue and overtake Israel when they're righteous, then that will be a testimony to all the peoples of the earth. And they will see and know that Adonai is the God of Israel and that he has called them and put his name on his people. So this shows that the people of Israel, being God's holy people and getting all of these blessings, is not simply a means of the people of Israel getting an awesome blessing for themselves, but rather it's a way of declaring God's greatness to all the peoples. It's a testimony to all of them. As Isaiah says, it's a light of God's salvation to the nations, to the Gentiles, and to the ends of the earth. When Israel nationally is righteous nationally, then all these blessings will overtake Israel nationally, and then the nation of Israel will spread God's light to all the other nations. This is on a corporate scale. When all of Israel is following in God's ways, these blessings will be undeniable, and so God will be undeniable, and his presence will be known throughout all the earth. And so again, this is why God says that Israel will be the head and not the tail, and they will be high above the other nations. It's because God is putting them in the unique situation to have a unique platform for declaring the goodness of God. God's elevation of the people of Israel is not for their own sake, it's for the sake of all the other peoples.
Yeah, I mean, Yeshua says, a city set upon a hill is not able to be hidden. You are the light of the world. No one puts a lamp under a measuring basket. They put it on a pedestal so that everyone can see it. If Israel's job is to be a light of salvation to the nations, then they need to be up higher than the nations, where everyone can see them and look to them, and they can be a beacon.
And this points to what we read in Zechariah, which we've quoted in multiple Torah portions before, where God says that 10 men of all the nations, or of the Goyim, the Gentiles, will grab the garment of a Jew and say, "Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." That's the entire purpose of God choosing the people of Israel, is that everyone will know God is with you. And so if God is with someone, then obviously there is a God. And so the people of Israel are meant to be that undeniable proof that will shine Yeshua's light. He's the one that brings salvation to the ends of the earth. And so the Jewish people, when they are obeying God and following in the new covenant so that they're free from the curses of the Torah, so that they can do the Torah righteously, then it will be a sign to all the nations, and they will come to God, they will flock to him, and they will attach themselves to the God of Israel. Now, after this, Moses then leaves this really positive note, and the portion takes a really dark turn as he begins to discuss the curses for Israel if they disobey God's commands. Moses starts out by basically giving direct opposites to the blessings that he had just declared. Whereas before they would be blessed in everything that they did if they're obeying him, God says that they will be cursed in everything that they do if they disobey him. They won't be blessed in the fruit of their womb and the fruit of their land, but rather they will be cursed in the fruit of their womb and the fruit of their land. They will have famine, and their children will be carried off into exile. Rather than having health and blessing in everything that they do, they will suffer illness and pestilence, and all the plagues that happened in Egypt will overtake the people of Israel. Rather than God blessing the land by giving it its rain in its season, instead it says that God will give dust and powder, and the people of Israel won't be able to grow anything. Rather than the people of Israel being blessed with victory over their enemies, instead their enemies will conquer them and destroy them and kill them, and their corpses will be left for the birds to eat. And it says that they and their king who they set up over themselves, so hearkening back to something we read previously, they and their king will be taken off into exile by a foreign nation which swoops down, speaking in a language that they don't even understand, and carrying them all off into a foreign land.
One thing I notice in the middle of these curses is this theme that keeps being reiterated of Israel having no one to help them. When God is with Israel, he fights for them, he helps them, and no one can stand in their way. But when the people of Israel turn from God, he removes his protection from them and he leaves them all alone. And the result is that when all these terrible things come upon the people of Israel, they are alone. There is no one to help them. They did not trust in God. They did not rely on him. Instead, they forsook him and tried to rely on themselves. And so God said, fine, if you don't want to rely on me, rely on yourself while all these bad things are happening, and see that you have no one and nothing without me.
And another thing that God says to the people of Israel is, you shall become a horror, a proverb, and a taunt among all the people where Adonai drives you. The sojourner who is among you shall rise above you higher and higher, but you will go down lower and lower. He shall be the head, and you will be the tail. So all these curses shall come on you and pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you would not obey Adonai your God by keeping his commandments. So in stark contrast to what we just read about the blessings, about how that will be a beacon for all the nations to see that God is real, God is saying that if the people of Israel don't follow his commands and then they enact the curses of this Torah, then that will be an opposite testimony. The people of Israel will be a taunt and a horror, and basically an example of what happens when you go against God. Rather than the people of Israel being lifted high above the other nations so that everyone can see them and can come to God, instead the people of Israel will be brought lower and lower and lower. Even the sojourner, the Gentile who lives in Israeli society, will be raised up above the natural-born people of Israel. And so in the end, instead of being the head, they will be the tail. They will be lower than the other nations. They will be left at those other nations' mercy with no one to help them, as Hosea said. And this speaks to the concept that we've talked about in previous portions, which is that the people of Israel carries God's reputation to the other nations. And when the people of Israel are obeying God and lifting him up as holy for the other nations to see, then that will be a testimony to those nations that God is real, God is good, and the peoples of the earth should come to him. But when the people of Israel are neglecting God's Torah, when they are forsaking him and forsaking his ways, then that will bring a detriment to God's reputation, because the other nations will say, look, this was God's people and he's letting them face all this horribleness. If God can't take care of his own people, then what kind of a God even is this? And so when the people of Israel forsake God, they aren't just hurting themselves. They are hurting God's reputation and God's ability to shine his light of salvation to the ends of the earth. Because of how God chose the people of Israel and attached his name and reputation and power to his people, that puts a heavy responsibility on the people of Israel. And that's why these blessings and these curses are so extreme, is because there's not really any middle ground that God has for the people of Israel. It's either walk in my ways or reject my ways. Either uphold my righteousness or desecrate my righteousness in the sight of all the peoples.
But then Moses also points out and reiterates that these curses are something that Israel will bring upon themselves because they reject God and they don't choose the abundance and the blessing that God is laying before them. Like we talked about all the way back in the beginning of Deuteronomy in the first portion, how God set the blessings before Israel and Israel refused, and God said, well then fine, you're not going to get it. That's exactly what Moses is warning about again here. He says that the curses shall be a sign and a wonder against you and your offspring forever. Because you did not serve Adonai your God with joyfulness and gladness of heart, because of the abundance of all things, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom Adonai will send against you in hunger and thirst and nakedness and lacking everything. God is happy to provide Israel with abundance in everything, if they will just be happy to serve him. And so all this suffering that Moses is describing is really just because Israel decides they don't want happiness, or because they decide that they can't get happiness by serving God, even though he will provide for them all that they ever need. But at the end of the day, Israel needs to pick a master. They can either choose to let God be their master and obey his instructions and then have gladness and joy and everything they'll ever need, or they can choose to let their enemies be their master. And then they will suffer. They will have lack. They will hunger. They will never be satisfied. They will be destroyed. Moses gives the people of Israel two options here, a binary choice. And neither of those options is to be their own master. They can either let God be their master or their enemies will be their master. And so this is something that is very applicable to all of us, in that we have to pick a master as well. Our master can be God and his righteousness, or our master can be sin and death. If we want to be independent from God's authority and go our own way, that's totally fine. That's your choice. But you will end up with sin and death and suffering. There is no option where you are your own master. The option that appears to be you're being your own master because you're not submitting yourself to God results in you being chained to your own enemy, even if you don't know it, because sin and death are the enemy of us all. Yeshua came to defeat that enemy. And if we trust in him, then we will have victory and he will be our master and we will serve him with joyfulness and gladness and plenty in everything we have. But if we do not follow him, if we choose that we are not content to serve him, then we will serve sin. We may think we're going our own way, but everyone who is committing a sin is a slave of the sin. It rules us, it tells us what to do, and we have to obey it. And it does not have our best interests at heart. It will not provide for us. It will only lead us to destruction. So we need to choose today, serve righteousness or serve wickedness, serve God or serve death.
And believe it or not, Moses actually goes on to give even more brutal and gory detail about the curses that will come upon Israel for their disobedience. He's already talked about how the people will suffer famine and disaster and illness, and then their enemies will come in and conquer them and take them into exile. But here, Moses specifically discusses what the siege against them will be like. He says that the invading nation will speak in a foreign language that they can't understand, and it will come in and consume all of their flocks and their herds and all of their possessions, leaving them with nothing. They'll come in and they'll tear down their fortresses and fortified places which they trusted in. So going back to what we said earlier about how the people of Israel weren't relying on God, and so they're left all alone. They put their confidence in themselves, and that ends up being brought down to nothing. And in even more detail, Moses says that during the siege, everyone will be so hungry that the people of Israel will resort to cannibalism, to eating their own children. It says that a man will be so greedy that he will eat his own child and hoard that child away from the rest of his family and just keep it for himself to eat. And God also says that all the diseases that he inflicted on Egypt during the 10 plagues, those diseases will stick to the people of Israel. And he also says that every disease and plague which isn't even written in the Torah will also come upon the people of Israel. So even if God didn't specifically write down a sickness in the Torah, all the sicknesses will come upon the people of Israel as they're in their rebellion. God says to them, "It shall come about that as Adonai delighted over you to prosper you and multiply you, so Adonai will delight over you to make you perish and destroy you. and you will be torn from the land where you are entering to possess it. Moreover, Adonai will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, and there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone, which you and your fathers have not known. And God says that the people of Israel will even end up going back to Egypt, and they'll offer to sell themselves as slaves. They'd sell themselves as slaves because they see no other way of surviving, no other means of getting sustenance. But ironically, even then, no one will even bother to buy the Israelis. So God is extreme and severe in his punishments for Israel, in his curses if they disobey him. He is vivid and explicit, and he wants to drill this into the people of Israel's heads. If you disobey me, this is what will happen. The people of Israel are forewarned. They have no excuse. The Torah says it right here as a witness against them for all generations.
Now, as we've talked about before, the people of Israel have a habit of being stubborn and not listening to Moses or obeying the words of God. And so, despite Moses' warning, the people of Israel actually did forsake God, and all these curses did come upon them. Every single one that was written here has come true for the people of Israel. They've been struck with drought and famine and pestilence and disease and starvation. God sent many enemies against the people of Israel over the centuries that they rebelled against him, and they continued to sin against him despite being attacked and oppressed, until eventually God sent the empires of Assyria and Babylon, which besieged all the cities and robbed and oppressed the people and broke down the walls in which they trusted, and they did indeed end up suffering so terribly that they resorted to cannibalism. The people of Israel refused to trust in God and call on him. Instead, they trusted in themselves, they trusted in their might, they trusted in the Egyptians even, and other nations to come around them and protect them. But God said, none of these people can protect you. You will be left with no one to help you. And they were indeed left with no one to help them. And so they were scattered, and there they served gods of wood and stone. They even went back to Egypt, just as Moses had said. And even after fulfilling all these curses, God did grant some mercy to the people of Israel and allowed the kingdom of Judah to return to the promised land and rebuild the temple. And for a while they returned, but they once again forsook God. They continued to sidestep the Torah. They did not receive Yeshua. And so yet again, God sent the Romans against the Jews and put them through another terrible siege, fulfilled all these curses a second time, and scattered them all across the earth, such as it is this day, where the people of Israel are scattered from one end of the earth to the other. But yet another time, God has granted mercy to the people of Israel and is allowing them to return to their land. About half of the Jewish people have returned to their homeland, even though the other half remain dispersed across the earth. So the return is not yet complete, and under the instructions given here, there is still the possibility that they could come under this curse again and be scattered again if they continue to disobey God, if they do not return to him and believe in Yeshua, the one he sent, and obey all the words of this Torah.
So after Moses finishes discussing all of these prophetic curses for the people of Israel, if and when they disobey and stray from God, Moses then basically moves on to set up what we're going to read in the next portion by basically introducing the fact that Moses is going to be making another covenant with the people of Israel here in the plains of Moab. The portion says here, "These are the words of the covenant which Adonai commanded Moses to make with the sons of Israel in the land of Moab, besides the covenant which he had made with them at Horeb." And then Moses says, "So keep the words of this covenant to do them, that you may prosper in all that you do." So this is a preview of what we're going to read in the next portion, where Moses is basically saying, we've already laid out all the blessings and all the curses for obeying and disobeying God. So choose to obey God. You are covenantally obligated and bound to keep God's commands. So we don't actually get into the content of this covenant very much in this portion. But what Moses does say in setting it up is that the people of Israel have seen all of God's provision. They saw God's power in Egypt. They've seen everything. And yet, he says in verse 4, "Yet to this day, Adonai has not given you a heart to know, nor eyes to see, nor ears to hear." So essentially, following up all these curses, Moses is ending on an even more sour note, saying, even in spite of all this, God hasn't given you a heart or eyes or ears to understand what I'm saying and to take it to heart. You are going to fail and you are going to enact these curses. In the book of Yochanan or John, it quotes Isaiah 6 and Isaiah 53, indicating a very similar sentiment to what Moses said here. Yeshua spoke these things, and having gone away, he was hidden from them. Yet even though he had done so many signs in front of them, they were not believing in him, so that the word of Yeshayahu of Isaiah the prophet would be fulfilled, which he said, Adonai, who gave credence to our report? And the arm of Adonai, to whom was it revealed? Because of this, they are not able to believe, such that again Yeshayahu said, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, so that they would not see with the eyes and understand with the heart and turn back, and I would heal them. Yeshayahu said these things because he saw his glory, saw Yeshua's glory, and spoke of him. So Moses and Isaiah and John are all indicating that even though God has given his word, he's given his commands, he's given his Messiah to the people of Israel, their hearts are hard, their eyes do not see, their ears do not hear, and none of it does them any good, and they are left trapped under the curse. Ultimately, the reason why Adonai has not saved us from all of our enemies and delivered us and given us peace and security and blessing, the reason is because the hearts of my Jewish people are still hard. We do not see, and we are unable to accept the blessing because we are unable to obey. And ultimately, what Moses says here about they don't have a heart that can understand, that shows the problem with the Torah. The problem with the Torah is that it does not change the hearts of the people of Israel. God gave this path to Israel and said, follow it. But then that didn't give them the ability to follow it. And this is exactly why God needed to send the new covenant, which gives a new heart to the people of Israel. It opens their eyes so that they can see. It opens their ears so that they can hear. Through the new covenant, it won't be like the covenant that God made at Horeb and they broke, or even like this covenant that God is making again here at Moab, which has curses against the people of Israel because of their disobedience. In the new covenant, God says that he gives them a new heart and a new spirit within them, and he writes the Torah on their hearts. But until such a time as the Jewish people accept the new covenant, until they accept their Messiah who mediated that covenant with them, until they accept the renewal of their hearts and the opening of their eyes, the Torah cannot bring life to the people of Israel. If they continue to pursue righteousness by their own actions instead of by faith and a new heart, then until they do that, then they will be under a curse. They come to Torah, they come to God's word, and then the Torah judges them and says, you are under a curse. You need another way. And that one way, the only way to God, is through the Messiah Yeshua.
So I think the big takeaway from this portion is that we need to choose the blessing that only comes from serving and obeying God. Moses laid out for the people of Israel all the blessings that they would receive if they paid attention to God and obeyed his voice. But on the other hand, he presented them with only curses if they chose to go their own way. And so he told the people of Israel that they need to either serve God with a joyful heart or serve their enemies with pain and suffering. God is giving the same choice to all of us. We can either choose the blessing and life that comes from following him, or we can choose the curse and slavery of sin that we bring on ourselves, which ends in death if we choose to go our own way. And ultimately, none of us are able to obey all of God's commands. We all sin, we all fail. And so God gave us one way to life, one way to receive the blessing in spite of the curse, and that is to rely on the one who took the curse for us, the Master Yeshua. By believing in him, we can then obey him, take up our execution stakes and follow him, and then by dying daily for him, we can have life, we can receive the blessing, and we can avoid all the curses and receive the everlasting life that only comes in him.
That wraps up the portion of Kiy-Tavo. Next week, we'll be looking at the portion of Nitzavim, so be sure to tune in for that. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep updated on new videos. And if you would, please consider sending us a donation to help us make more videos like these. We would really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week. God bless.